What are we looking at here today, boys and girls? We are looking at Space Harrier for the Sega Genesis, and the date here says 1988. I'm not sure if that's the date it was released on the Genesis or if that's the date it was in the arcade. Not exactly sure. Kind of doesn't matter. We're going to go ahead and play it. Fun game. Very, very fun game. Come on, dude. Hit start. Okay. Alert, Fantasyland falls into crisis now. Get down. Get to the chopper. Okay. You can choose what area you want to start in. Hope City, Hell Peak, Hot Palace. Let's start in Hot Palace. Why the heck not? That looks cool. Kind of looks like Rome. Yeah, so Space Harrier, fun game. This was a port from the arcade for the Sega Genesis. This was very faithful. The cool thing about the Sega Genesis is that, number one, Sega is a company that makes games in the arcade. When they made the Genesis, it was basically, I don't even want to say scaled down. I would say more accurately, just a slightly modified version of an arcade cabinet as far as the guts that were inside this little black box. It had a Motorola 68000 processor as the central processor, had a Z80 processor to handle music, had a really good music synthesizer, had the ability to play digital music and sounds, and it very prominently featured a lot of digital sound effects, much more than the Nintendo did. That was their main thing, was their main claim was that, hey dude, we got 16 bits and we got superior graphics, we got superior sound. They came in trying to dethrone Nintendo, which was the king at the time. 16-bit console, this was, this is when next gen started. So the 80s was the 8-bit era. The Genesis launched the first wave of, let's just say, next gen, where the hardware was radically different and improved. And so, look at this thing here. Fire! 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 He's throwing fireballs at me. And so, yeah, you basically had to fly through these 3D levels, had to avoid all kinds of obstacles, shoot all kinds of bad guys, and make it to a boss. And the bosses were always cool. The bosses were very large, very colorful, came in and out of the screen, really kept with the 3D perspective. Sega did a lot of these 3D-ish type games. This is still 80s, late 80s, early 90s technology. So the 3D is not done like it is now. Now all 3D is done with polygons and textures and lighting and shading, and the 3D graphics now are incredible. This was still done technically with two-dimensional sprites, and so these sprites were, I don't know if they scaled them or if they actually had a different image for each size, but it was still 2D sprites that looked like it was coming in and out of the screen. So the whole 3D was a very good illusion. And very effective. Sega had a ton of games like this. There was all their driving games like Hang On, there was Outrun, a lot of good games in the arcade. Dang it, I'm dying. I am dying from that dude. I went on the hardest difficulty level, or the highest level there, and that dude was a beast. So, let's go ahead and let's start this again. And I'll start off on an easier difficulty level. Alert Fantasy. We'll start in the beginning. We will start in the Stuna area. Stuna. Okay. So this is the first wave. And this is technically Space Harrier 2. I don't remember if there was a Space Harrier 2 in the arcade or not, or if they just maybe called it this for the console. Not exactly sure. But fun game. In this first game here, I think you could actually shoot those trees. Yeah, so the trees were destroyable obstacles. Boom. Those big flaming donuts are not.
Get ready.
Later rounds had like stone columns and stuff that you could not destroy. You could only avoid. The guy looks like he's holding on to a little vacuum cleaner or something, and that's allowing him to fly through the air. In the arcade, you were sitting down on, similar to like what they had for the Hang On and their different motorcycle games, you were sitting on this like motorcycle body, full-size motorcycle body thing, and you leaned that from left to right to steer, and then you had, I think, some triggers. This is your first kind of sort of boss. This guy looks so cool. Just seeing this guy in the arcade on the giant screen and how colorful he was and how large he was utterly impressive. And then this did a good job bringing it to the home console as well. I just took him out. So he was not the boss. He was like the warm-up boss. What is the boss? Okay, the boss is a turtle. A fireball hurling turtle. Okay, three-headed turtle. Okay, so the turtle is completely invulnerable when his shell is out. Okay, I've just taken away 2 of his heads. So it looks like the pattern here is dodge the fireballs and then hit the head when he comes up close. Okay, turtle has been turtified. We are now onto the 4's yard. Next round. Very cool use of color, and the illusion of 3D was very, very good. They basically had to scale 3D sprites to do it, or scale the sprites, scale a 2D sprite to make it look 3D, and create that, size. It got bigger as it got closer. Dude, you died. Do I get to put up my initials? Okay, let's put in an O. Let's put in a G. And that's Ed. Okay, we have Edded. So, cool game, fun game. I'm going to try it one more time. I'll try a different level now. So, I've done that. Let's go to YEES land. Yeehaw! We're going to YEES land. So, this looks kind of snowy. Cool palettes. I think the Sega Genesis could only display 64 colors on screen. And that was probably its only weakness, because all of the rest of the hardware was really exceptional hardware. But this game really made good use of the colors and paletizing those colors, so it didn't feel like it was dramatically reduced visual fidelity from the arcade. The arcade was just phenomenal, especially on such large screens. Oh, there's dudes. Bad dudes. Oh, dude, why are you shooting me, dude?
Get ready.
And there's things on the ground here that kind of look like clamshells. And these clamshells will open up and shoot at me. There are no poles to avoid right now. Okay, oh, cool. Flying frogs. Spitting frogs. Looks like a good tactic. Well, until I died. It seemed like a good tactic was to spin in circles and shoot. Spin and shoot. I think a better tactic would be to avoid all dangerous obstacles at all times, which I have not been able to do completely successfully. But yeah, it made a good use of color and paletizing those colors. Oh, look at this guy here. He's a frozen meanie. Oh, he's shooting out the ice donuts at me. Okay. He's fast. He is wicked fast. Wow. So he's changing colors to indicate his level of damage. So he's getting darker, which was a nice thing about this game. This game really exercised color or illustrated color very, very well. This is one game where you didn't look at it and say, oh yeah, the arcade is obviously better. So yeah, the Sega Genesis system was really, I don't want to say a watered down, I would want to say just a slightly scaled down arcade machine. And if there was anything on the Genesis that was significantly less than the arcade, it would have just been the amount of colors it could produce. But graphically, it was almost identical. Sound-wise, digital sound, types of sprites it could create. It was an arcade machine. And because it was made by Sega, and Sega is the company that makes these games for the arcade, and it had almost all the same hardware, it was really easy for them to port these games over to it. You know, they probably had to do next to no rewriting, other than changing it from saying insert coin to press start. You know, they probably didn't have to do a whole lot of work, which was great. So it was probably good for them to have an easy way to get titles on their platform, and it's great for us, the game player, to have a very authentic arcade experience. Genesis, very, 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 very fond memories of playing the Genesis. And I wasn't even a kid at this point. In the 90s, I was in my 20s. So, I mean, I've never really stopped being a kid, and I'm definitely in my 20s. I guess you could still say I was very, very much childish. But I was an adult. I was living on my own, you know, working, paying my own rent and all that kind of stuff, and playing Genesis. Genesis was definitely part of the 90s, part of my 20s. It was good times. And another cool thing about the Genesis, which, and again, you know, they're coming on the heels of the Nintendo, and they're trying to tout as many reasons and advantages to buy them and not buy Nintendo. And the thing about the Genesis, those guys look really cool. Was the Genesis was in stereo, and so there was a headphone jack in the front of the Genesis that you could then plug into your stereo system. And that's another thing. When you're like in your early 20s and you have your own apartment, you know, having a stereo system and big speakers was a big thing. You know, like anytime you moved, the first thing you plug in were your speakers, so you could listen to your tunes while you're unpacking. You know, rapid fire. How about I turn rapid fire on? Okay, cool. So apparently there's a rapid fire option I just discovered. Let's try it one more time with the rapid fire option. But yeah, so what I was starting to say was that another cool thing that the Sega Genesis had was the fact that it could play in stereo. And from what I recall, it was, I think I was on Zero Polis. So I think it was a headphone jack in the front of the Genesis, and then you would then plug that into like a Y adapter that had your red and white RCA plugs to go into your stereo. And so you could crank this thing up if you had a good stereo. And in my 20s, I had, you know, that was one of my priorities. I had to have the stereo with the big speakers, and, you know, this is back when stereos were in the speakers were in your big wooden cabinets. You had your subwoofer, your mids, and your tweets, and these big wooden cabinets, you know. You had your amplifier, all that kind of stuff. So listening to a Genesis on a good home stereo, cranking that up and then listening to this music was really a cool experience. It was definitely separated it from the Nintendo, which was mono. The synthesizer was nowhere near as good, and it was mono. So hearing really good synthesized music with digital sound effects and hearing it in stereo was literally mind-boggling. A couple of the games that really blew my mind was, I remember Shinobi. Hearing that introductory title opening sequence with the music on Shinobi, that was pretty mind-blowing. The opening title song to Streets of Rage was really, really cool. There were certain defining games and moments and soundtracks that I recall listening to on the Genesis on my stereo that were just so cool. And that's such a good impression of just this being a super technical powerhouse of a gaming system, you know. Literally the most technologically advanced thing on the planet at the time it was released. And boom, these guys have killed me again. These robot dudes here are pretty tough. But this was fun. I enjoyed playing it. I know I talked way too much, and I apologize. I have a bad habit of not shutting up like I continue to not do. But what you have just witnessed, folks, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, has been Space Harrier 2 for the Sega Genesis, released sometime around 1988-ish, give or take a year or two or whatever. Cool game, great graphics, great music, great use of color and sprites and pseudo 3D perspective scaling, scrolling type stuff, you know, Sega. So yeah, cool title, direct port from the arcade, good stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. I've been the original gamer, StevieStrow. I will see you all next time.